Добро вечер, ја гледате неделната анализа, јас сум Боријан Јовановски. Мој вечерашен гостин е Сергеј Лебедев, писател во екзил, кого Нью Йорк Таймс го дефинираше како најдобар писател од помладата генерација на писатели во Русија. Mr. Lebedev, welcome in TV21, and thank you to accept our invitation. So, you are now in exile, or in a way you are, how to say, forbidden in Russia. How is your life now, being out of the motherland?
I think I was prepared to be in a way out of the motherland for many, many years. It's not just started 5 years ago or 6 years ago. As a young journalist, I was investigating, for example, the crimes committed by the Russian army. And being like 23 or 24 years old, I was sent by my newspaper to the really remote locations in Russia. And this was the moment, actually, when I realized that everyone there would not like the truth to be revealed. And I felt myself like a spy in enemy's country, but I wasn't able to explain myself what country sent me there. So this loneliness and this feeling that, yeah, you have a very grim reality, you have no support, you have a state against you, is something what I lived with for years. But now it just became evident. Yes, you are out of your country.
You mentioned loneliness, which is very difficult state of mind, but also being accused by your own country that I believe you love very much, that you're a traitor or enemy. So how you manage to live those both very complex feelings?
Okay, my family history helps me because my great fathers and grandmothers, my great grandfathers and great grandmothers, their relatives, they all been in a certain moment accused of treason. They all been proclaimed the enemies of the state by the Soviet Union. It's in a bit like in your DNA.
Yes, I found that between 1970s and 1991, state security, you said that the state security wrote my family's story. I mean, it's a kind of a tradition in your family.
I mean, it's not a tradition just in it's not just a tradition in my family. It is what happened with a lot of families in the Soviet Union. I can draw you some very simple chart. In my family archive, I have a photo made in a summer in July of 1914, just really a month before the shot in Sarajevo. It's 40 people are staying there. Young, old, in the military uniforms, in the civil uniforms. This is the family, the big family. And in the left corner of this photo is my grandma. She's like, I think, 6 years old. She's barely visible. You should know that she's on the photo to recognize her. In the 30 years after 1945, she will be the one person alive. This is the ratio. This is the murder ratio. Of course, it's the two wars, it's the repressions, all together. So when we're speaking about the loneliness, it's what I was born with. I was deprived of my relatives. I was deprived of a noble family. I am the remnant. I'm the small piece of what existed. Okay, and then you deal with this. Maybe you deal with this by your writing, because you are the only person who can speak for these people. You are the only person who know that they ever existed. And also, I feel, and I was told many times, that doing so, I'm working also for many, many other Russian or not Russian families who suffered the same during the Soviet period.
What was the reason for your predecessor to be oppressed?
Some of them were noble men and noble women enough. Some of them were churchmen enough. Some of them had the German origin enough. So very different
So never
accusations.
appropriate for the regimes they change
in
the...
one way or another, they were all class enemies.
You said that Russia became an independent state or law enforcement agency have committed lots of crimes that can be attributed to the Soviet period. Where is the source of the evil? It looked like you're preoccupied, and you're marked and inspired in looking for and searching for an answer of the source of this evil. So during your career of first journalist, investigative, then writer, looking for this answer, what did you find so far?
To make the long story short, let's travel back in time. The year 1994. And next year it will be 30th anniversary of the first so-called Chechen War. And I do believe this was the moment of choice and the moment of change. Because when Russia invaded in Chechnya in December 1994, this was the moment when Russia went back on its imperial track. And all the further developments were in a sense predestined. This was the moment of choice, and Yeltsin chose the violent, the military solution, not negotiations, not discussions, not recognition of independence, military solution. And this was it. And this was it. And all what happened later was, as I told you, predestined, because the war demands the image of the enemy. The war demands increased influence of the state security. The war changes the society, because initially Russian society opposed this war, but not actively. And this is the very important thing to understand about the Russian society. If being asked, people will say, okay, we do not want this war to happen, but to protest, to actively engage with the government or with the power, no, this would never happen. I myself was supposed to be drafted in the Russian army in 1999, exactly when the Second Chechen War started. And I do remember myself clearly understanding, no, it's a criminal war. I do not want to be the part of it. But now I'm thinking with the shame, why a lot of young people of my generation never formed a protest, never said no to the government. It would have been possible in the 1999. But we never thought so.
How do you explain? I mean, Russia played an important part in the history of European civilization. In a way, Russia is Europe, but on the other hand, we see this, repeating history of the, tough regimes oppressing people. Where is Russia? I mean, how you define, how you feel Russia as a part of Europe, as a part of European civilization, or where it is? I mean.
Before speaking where is Russia, let's talk about what is Russia. Juridically and formally, Russia is so-called federation, which is not true. Russia is an immense conglomerate of different nations, even tribes or national groups, brought together by centuries of conquest, by centuries of state violence, military violence, cultural violence, occupation violence, you name it. And until the moment this conglomerate will be based on something else, not on violence, the violent and oppressive regimes will appear and appear again, because nobody can actually clearly explain if Belarus or Ukraine can be independent, why Tatarstan could not be independent. There is no logical or real explanation. Political Tatarstan can do so, for example, or the Caucasus republics, they can do so. Therefore, you need the state oppression to keep them at bay. You need the state oppression to keep these different places and nations together. And this is the moment where even most of the Russian liberals, they pretend that there is not a problem, that it's enough to remove Putin and Russia will be free, happy country. It will not be a free, happy country until the question of national relations will be properly solved with a certain degree of cultural or political sovereignty, with the right for secession, where it Balkans, you know, all these things very well.
How do you explain? I mean, we heard a lot of analysts and and comments about why Putin started this war in Ukraine. But it's interesting to have a comment from you, somebody from Russia, well informed, and you know what's Russian society. Why he started this, if I may say, adventure?
I mean, he started to mess with Ukraine many years ago, since the first Maidan in 2004, 2005, because all of a sudden the neighbor country, Ukraine, had shown the ability to overthrow the governments and the desire to go to Europe, to be democratic. I think that since this moment, Putin and his government, they were afraid that Ukraine will show an example for Russia, the example of democratic change of power. Therefore, they interfered with every round of Ukrainian elections. We do remember how the candidate Yushchenko was poisoned. You remember probably his terribly distorted face. It was a clear special op of Russians. And of course, after the second Maidan, when Ukraine clearly chose the European way of development, they were simply afraid, as they were afraid, for example, in 2020, when Belarusians all of a sudden poured to the streets, started to protest en masse on a very huge scale. It was sort of a wildfire for Moscow, because this sets an example.
But this war is not easy for Putin to handle this. This war, it costs money, it costs a lot of lives. We are talking about hundreds of thousands of people who are dead in this war. I mean, do you think that it's a price that he can pay, and that it's for them to stay in his position?
Let me tell you one thing about their mindset. Let's go back again, 1994. The first time a Russian army invaded Chechnya. Russian general commander said a few days before the invasion, it will be ended in 3 days. I need just one paratrooper regiment to take Grozny. The Russians always think about their counterparts as they do not exist. They thought that Chechens will not fight back. They will surrender immediately. And they thought that Ukrainians will surrender.
How possible is it? It's autistic, if I
but this is what happens in their brains. This is what happened in their mind. They think that the country is so powerful, so big, that nobody will resist. And it's very strange, because they learned the very painful lessons during the First and Second Chechen War. But these lessons, they cannot learn. They always think, okay, Ukrainians, what are these Ukrainians? They will not fight. And of course, they live in their own informational bubble. Like 2 weeks ago, I spoke with the person who had a chance to see the documents prepared by the Federal Security for Yeltsin before the Chechen invasion. In these documents, the Federal Security wrote that the Chechens will bring flowers to the Russian troops. This is the info on which the decision was made. And we clearly see that the Russians invading Ukraine in February 2022, they were bringing their parade uniforms with them, preparing for the parade in Kiev. And this is only one good thing about the Russians. They are really not in the reality. But this is the imperial complex of superiority. We are the Russia. We are this mighty force. Who will risk to withstand us? And the total rejection of other subjectivity.
So, is there anybody in Russia who faced the reality and said, what we found, what we believed would happen it's not true and the reality is completely different?
No, of course there are certain ideological explanations offered now. It's not the Ukraine we are fighting with. It's the whole West.
World again, or West against
Yes.
Russia.
Because if it would have been just Ukraine, it would have been done. But this hostile West is fighting against us, and therefore we cannot win as we planned. Russian propaganda is very flexible. It's very flexible, and the explanations are offered. And now even the retreat can be explained this way. Of course, we're outnumbered. It's the West.
One of the very often in your novels, you're exploring the aggressive method of the secret police KGB in Russia and all around in Europe. Are you afraid, being in exile in Berlin, having in mind that KGB's network is present all over? I mean,
I'm concerned.
Which way? I mean, yeah.
I mean, it just demands some sort of, security precautions.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, information should be secured, communication channels should be secured, but in a way, again, it's this game goes for centuries. Russian revolutionists were in Europe before the revolution, and the Tsarist police were hunting them. Then the White Guards were here in Europe, and the Soviet police were hunting them. So if you know the history and you know that there is a real threat, I mean, because a lot of current Russian liberals are rejecting this.
Are there many like you in Berlin? I mean, Russian dissidents?
And Berlin is now sort of a capital, of course.
You gather, you have a regular communication.
I mean,
between
there are many different networks working sometimes together, sometimes. But I have a problem with the most of, let's say, other Russian intellectuals or oppositioners, because they are still focused of, how to say, maintaining the Russian culture innocence in this case. They try to divide or separate Russian state and Russian culture and say that state is responsible and Russian culture has nothing to do with this.
Why Russian culture? How you explain,
because
how you define
I
it?
do believe that Russian culture, with all its, gems and whatsoever, is a bit of complicit. Because first of all, the Russian culture was used as a tool of Russification. In case of Ukraine, it's very evident. Russian culture was used to force the Ukrainian language out of Ukraine. And of course, the many figures of Russian classics, they maintain the same complex of cultural superiority. And even now, Russians are still trying to cope with the fact that Ukraine can be the subject of its own history and destiny. They still think that we, the Russians, could give advices, can give the evaluations. We cannot. We cannot. And it's better to keep this line very strict.
How you see your future? You see your future in Germany, or you feel like you're in Berlin temporary and you'll be back in Russia? I mean, what's your prospect? What's your forecast?
My lens to see into the future are my books. I'm not thinking where I should be. I'm thinking what books I should write.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of work here. Maybe it will be done in Berlin, maybe somewhere else, but it's not about the territory.
But
it's about intellectual tasks.
I guess you would like very much to be able to go home in Russia.
I mean, right now to discuss these options is just to weaken yourself. Because it will provoke nostalgia, it will provoke sentiments. Right now it's impossible.
No, I'm asking to see what's your opinion, what's your reflection. Do you believe that this war will end soon, and that
No.
some some democratization is going to happen in Russia?
Unfortunately, I have very grim predictions. This war will not be over soon, because unfortunately Russia has proven itself to be able to maintain economy, to be able to sustain a long protracted military effort. And I do believe that the Russian society, people who are in Russia, they are slowly being cooked. The war, and the full-scale war is going for 2 years. And people are getting used to it, to live with this. And unfortunately, I don't see any real base for protest, because still the war is not affecting the general population like every family. The quantity of those who've been drafted are relatively small in comparison to the whole population. First time in the Russian history, people are being well paid for the participation in the war. It's something absolutely new. It makes this like high-risk investment. And unfortunately, Putin is very good in outweighting. I mean, he had seen presidents coming and going.
Yeah, it's obvious that Russia army is not able to invade whole Ukraine, but it's easy to keep this stage of the war.
Yeah, I mean, and we have very disproportionate thing. Russia can attack the whole depth of Ukrainian territory. Russia can destroy the critical infrastructure. We are facing the second winter, when again it will be attacks on the electricity, on the power plants. For how long people can live in these conditions? This is Putin's thought. Maybe not about the full-scale victory on the front line, but he wants to cripple Ukraine as much.
And he can maintain the standard that Russian people have now. By the way, how they live? Do you have a relatives, family
Yes, I do.
in Russia? So how they live? What's their ordinary life, everyday life?
I would say, in terms of economy, the most visible thing that the Chinese cars are replacing European cars. Okay, they are available. The basic products are there. Prices are rising, but they are rising everywhere. From my perspective, from what I hear from the people, in general, a lot of effort is made to maintain this standard of life. The new hospitals are opened, Moscow underground is being built. So it's not like the war is really tangible. There is no real hardships. And this is sort of a basis for going further.
So how you see this crisis on the long term? What is going to produce? I mean, what is going to be the outcome?
I don't.
It's never-ending story, or
I don't know, because we have the group of countries who are supporting Ukraine. It's a huge group, and it will be on some period very easy to split this group, because some, like, I don't know, like Hungary are already saying no, no, no.
Slovakia,
others
maybe.
like Slovakia already signaling we do not want this anymore. But these countries' effort is critical to maintain Ukrainian ability to stand for their country.
So,
For how long this union will stay, we do not know.
That's my next question. I mean, you live in Europe and you know Europe well. Europe is in obvious crisis right now and looks like fragile. So my question is, what do you think, how long Europe can resist on what Putin is doing?
I mean, it will also depend on understanding of European people or of European politicians that it's not just, I don't know, Russia's Ukrainian conflict. It's the world conflict, because of course I clearly think that what had happened in Israel, I mean the Hamas attack, of course so much plays in the hand of Moscow. and we had seen that the Hamas delegation was traveling to Moscow. And the ability of Putin to assist these new places of conflict being defrozen is immense. After this October, we are in a new reality. What else will happen? We do not know. And the only question is, for how long political elites of Europe will be able to maintain this firm stand. I cannot predict this. Nobody can predict this. But it's the only thing you can do.
Yesterday,
to stay united. Yeah. I'm sorry, it's very banal. It's not an explanation. But the Putin's plan is also very clear, to outweigh and to see what happens. He's very good in these tactical moves. He senses the opportunities and he exploits them. I mean, because he's not basically a politician. He is the person who was raised and educated in state security. He was taught to rule people by fear.
And there is no opposition, mainly?
No.
Or people who are pretending, no.
I mean,
to present some alternative.
No. Of course, there is a huge amount of people, not huge, but sufficient amount of people, who in their inner thoughts are not supporting this war. Yes, they are. But in terms of activity, in terms of exercising real influence on the situation, no, there is no opposition.
Yesterday we heard Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, saying that one of the main targets for Russian president is Balkan. Do you believe that? I mean, why, first of all? Why Balkan? What his
because
interest
Balkans are fragile.
But why he needs the war in the Balkans?
To distract the resources, to distract the attention. It's very simple. No, we will not imagine anything. But let's talk about what happened in the Middle East, in the East. Already we see that the military supplies for Ukraine are being diverted to Israel. It weakens Ukraine's position in the battlefield. Imagine the other one. Their forces, their money, everything will be diverted. It cripples Ukraine. And therefore, he will exploit everything he can possibly, set on the fire. And being really cynical and sinister person, he will not think twice if he sees the opportunities. His hands are really bloody, and he has nothing to lose. It's a bit of, I don't know, no way back situation, because he clearly understands that in the moment when he is ousted of power, even the next Russian president can trade him for the Hague and trade him. He should stay in power, and the only way to stay in power is to maintain the tensions everywhere in the world.
Many people in Macedonia, ethnic Macedonians, support Putin. What would be your comment to them? As your guest now and Skopje.
I can't even imagine what image of Putin exists in somebody's heads. But he's not the politician. He is not the political leader coming even from the former Communist Party, like Yeltsin. He is the guy who was specially trained to deceive. He is the guy who comes from security agency, who was always above the law. And he is extremely dangerous. You may not see this, but just believe the person who lived in Russia. He is extremely dangerous. And he's dangerous exactly because, I don't know, in Latin America or in Asia, people can see sort of a other leader in him. He exploits this. He is very good at exploiting people. So the best way to deal with him is not to buy anything he sells. Anything he sells. Because he's not trustworthy in any sense. I mean, even though, look on this, I don't know what happened with Prigozhin. Prigozhin was given the president's word, nothing will happen. And Prigozhin was murdered in Kundblat 1 month after. Will you trust such a person? You will not.
What's your opinion? What's your feeling about Balkans?
As a person,
Yeah,
I
as
love,
a writer person.
I love them. I love them.
Why? What's so lovable?
Okay, I will not speak about the climate and food.
Yeah.
You know everything about this. I feel that we share something in common, I mean, socialist past, but still you have the bigger degree of, I don't know, freedom and, I mean, inner freedom. And being the person from the north, like the frozen person, because Russians are always described as a heart, open people, but they're not. We are cold people. And of course, when
it's cold. I mean,
yeah, and of course, when we see the people, when we see the people of the south, we are fascinated by your lifestyle, by your ability to maintain joy in life, even though the life can be really, really hard and problematic. And I would say that, again, we share the experience of hardships in the 90s, quite serious ones. But given the fact that like 30 years ago, the war was barely everywhere, the Balkans can prove that if the right people are doing right things, life will, how to say, flourish again.
Your first time in Skopje, and I have an honor to host you the very first. It was the very first station in Skopje is TV21. So you don't know Macedonia, but you've been in Serbia. Serbia is the only one country in Europe that, I mean, together maybe with Hungary, that, you know, it's preserving the very close relation with Putin, if I may say, not with the Russian, but with Putin especially. So have you found an answer why Serbia is so, I mean, still very loyal to Putin?
Yeah, I mean, I think the answer is obvious, because what united Russia and Serbia in the 90s? They both felt that, yeah, Serbia is smaller than Russia, but still Serbia felt that we are being robbed, as and these countries who are leaving us. Russia felt the same, and both Russia and Serbia exploited these feelings of their population. And I think that it's just the historical similarities which are really, really, really clear. The Russian concept of Greater Russia, the Serbian concept of Greater Serbia. It's very clear why these two countries stick to each other.
You mentioned, I mean, one of the reasons why Serbia is so close with, you know, Russia and maybe, you know, Macedonian support for Putin also. One of the reasons is the Orthodox Church, although it's not clear because Ukrainians, they're also Orthodox, but yeah, somehow, okay. And I was marked by your novel Untraceable, when the professor Kalitin, the main protagonist, is a talented Soviet youth. He invents neophyte, a neurotoxin that cannot be traced, kind of a Novichok, in a special laboratory built within a former Orthodox church. An angel, you say, in your book, half scrubbed out, watched him from above. Yeah. I mean, I found interesting that you put, you know, the laboratory of this Novichok, the kind of the evil, is born in a former
church.
Orthodox church. And you mentioned this angel watching your main protagonist from above producing this poison. I mean, could you explain a bit the scene and the narrative that you are using? Why it was you put the production of the poison in the church?
First of all, it's quite a historical reality because immense amount of churches were destroyed and other immense amount of churches were used for other things. In Moscow, one church was used, for example, as a place where the animals from the zoo were living, like some, I don't know, bears or wolves or whatsoever. So this is what the Soviet life was exactly, the replacement. But then, of course, in the 90s, all of a sudden, this most
Church become a very
this
important,
most atheist country in the world, all of a sudden become the most religious country in the world. But what sort of a religion this is? From my point of view, of course, this new or revived Orthodox Church is now just replacing the ideological department of the KPSU. It's offering the state ideology. It's not about the faith in God. It's about something else. And honestly, working in the former KGB archives in Lithuania and Ukraine, I've seen a lot of documents about how the different religious groups were treated in the Soviet Union. I mean, the late Soviet Union. I don't know. Protestants, Baptists, Jehovah's Witnesses, Muslims, they were all treated very badly and considered to be dangerous. But the Orthodox Church as an institution was never. It was so subjugated by the state that it effectively became the branch of the state, even though maintaining the smokescreen of its independence. And now, unfortunately, it's just a political instrument. It doesn't mean that there are no good priests in this church. They are. They're there. But as an institution, this is just a state-owned corporation offering political assistance. And it's not accidental that Ukrainians are really trying to push the Moscow Orthodox Church of their country. And this is the huge reason behind this.
You live in Potsdam, near Berlin, which is near the line of the Berlin Wall. The Berlin Wall physically do not exist anymore, and we believe that the fall of the wall will open the space for rapprochement between the West and East, but unfortunately it seems like an open space for a main crash between East and West. What do you expect? I mean, where the Europe, in which direction is going now? I mean, we have to prepare ourselves for the new Cold War or I don't know, hot war maybe. I don't know.
I think that first time in many years, Europe really understood that it has its East. Because before, the countries like Lithuania or Estonia or Latvia or Poland, they were somewhere there in the East. And all of a sudden, this Eastern direction again became important. And I would say that the Berlin Wall is being rebuilt, but it's there. It's on the border between or it's in the front line between the Russian and Ukraine. And this Eastern shift or Eastern turn is rather important, because before, I would say that all this eastern part was considered to be something in between of like Berlin and Moscow.
So in a way, Putin woke up.
Putin woke up, yeah. And I was positively surprised by the political reactions after the full-scale invasion, because he underestimated the response.
What's your criticism towards Europe? Because, must be something badly done in Europe side
No,
in order
not at all.
to,
Absolutely.
to arrive at this point?
Absolutely. I would say that nothing was badly done. I mean, the general argument, of course, is that the NATO expansion to the east was the reason. But let's stick to the reality. Again, 1994, you are, I don't know, Estonian, Lithuanian, or Latvian citizen. And you see that Russia, after 3 years of independence, launches military operation against Chechnya. What do you think? With your record of abuse, with your record of occupation, you see we will be the next. We need NATO. And only Russia, with its irresponsible military actions, provoked this expansion. If Russia would have been on a very clear track to be a friendly neighbor, why the hell on earth you need this NATO? But it was Russia who started this. And we should be very clear on this and not to exploit this expansion as like we were provoked. I don't know, 5 or even 6 years ago, 10 years ago, ordinary Russians, they were not concerned about this NATO at all. I mean, buying Western goods, driving Western cars, traveling to Europe. Nobody was really threatened by this NATO. It's only then was exploited by propaganda, and Russians were explained that yes, it's such a dangerous thing. These are missiles close to our borders. Nobody really paid fucking shit about this. And given the immense amount of help given in Russia in the 90s, it's unbelievable how ungrateful in this way Russia could be. For 10 years, we've been living in the Western credits. I remember Western humanitarian aid being distributed in my schools. At least should be.
You're editing right now, you're in the process of editing right now, as I was told before this interview, your new book, inspired by the current war. What's the story?
Okay, it's very simple story. I'm trying to understand with the, let's say, artistic means, one very simple thing. For many, many years, for decades, Russia pretended to be the stronghold of anti-fascism. And what we're seeing now is Russia is turning itself into the honestly fascist state. How this can happen? I'm trying to give an answer in my novel.
Hope we're going to have an opportunity to read your book in Macedonian then.
We'll do our best.
So welcome to Skopje.
Yeah, thank you for this invitation.
Thank you for the interview. Тоа беше Сергеј Лебедев, руски писател во екзил, кој, како што реков на почетокот на емисијата, западните медии го означуваат како еден од најзначајните млади руски автори. Ви благодарам за вниманието и пријатна неделна вечер.